The minimum wage is often a hot topic all around the world, but what is it exactly? Basically, you work and the government has put a restriction on your employer to the minimum amount you will be paid considering your award. This should be good, right? Well, consider these 3 points to minimum wage. What if we raise the minimum wage? What if we abolish the minimum wage? And what if we do absolutely nothing? Okay, wait up. To understand the economic model, we first need to understand how minimum wage is calculated in Australia. Like you are probably thinking now, I once thought it was a calculation based on living expenses for an individual, like rent, groceries, clothing, and transportation. But this is definitely not the case. As stated by Ian Harper, previously on the Commission of Fair Pay Australia,
there is no calculation. How could there be? It is based on 2 sets of factors. The factor influencing the employer's decision to take on or shed workers, and also the factor influencing the individual's decision to seek or remain in work.
This is why we'll be using the demand and supply economic model, factors affecting employers' decision to alter the supply of job opportunities, and the factors affecting the individual's demand for employment. So let's start exploring the effects of raising the minimum wage. I bet you would be happy. I bet a lot of people would be happy. But that happiness is only temporary. There are possible positive, negative, and also neutral effects of raising the minimum wage. Okay, let's start on a good note. People would be paid more money for the work that they are previously doing on a lower wage, and in turn this would lead to more disposable income for those households, and allow these now higher paid workers to push more and more money into the economy, creating a better turnover for consumerist behaviour. Buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell. This behaviour is good for the economy. Okay, so now that we have started on a high, let's bring you back down to reality. Although a rise in minimum wage would benefit the monetary value for some, this benefit does not reach everybody. In fact, some employers would be more likely to fire a lot of people than take a loss in profits. But why would this happen? It comes down to basically this. There is a ratio an employer will think about before hiring a person, and it is the cost-value ratio, which means an employer looks for the value in a worker, like skills and experience, that is greater than the worker's cost, which in this case is the minimum wage. If the worker's value is not greater than the minimum wage, the employer will not hire them. So, if we were to increase the minimum wage, this decreases the chance of lower skilled individuals finding or retaining employment. Therefore, these lower skilled individuals would not benefit from an increase in minimum wage, which is the very group of people minimum wage was implemented to protect. From this increase in unemployment, the amount of people living below the poverty line would more than likely increase. Now let's look at a neutral effect that basically warrants a rise in minimum wage pointless. So let's consider the possibility that employers would not fire employees to bring down wage costs. The company's fixed costs, however, of the manufacturing or selling of goods and services would increase. And we already know that companies are not willing to see a decline in profits one way or another. Therefore, the increase in wages will be put right onto the prices of these goods and services, causing an inflation type effect. By increasing the minimum wage so people could afford living expenses, hikes up the price of goods and services, and therefore living expenses, meaning that in the end the raised minimum wage is proportionally the same amount as it was before, but now our dollar is worth less. Great. For this scenario, the demand and supply curves are perfect, and at this point we find the equilibrium. Equilibrium is the minimum wage and theoretically where the demand for jobs and the supply for jobs are equal. Move the equilibrium at the price point up as if you were increasing minimum wage. As you can see, the demand for jobs is higher than the supply of jobs, which causes all these problems. The people still in jobs earn more, however, there are more people seeking jobs than jobs available. The thing with the demand and supply economic model is that it assumes the market will adjust over time. In theory, the demand and supply curve will meet once again, leading to an inflation-like effect that we just talked about before. Okay, so that's some effects if we raise the minimum wage, but have you ever considered life without a minimum wage? Let's just assume that it would be possible to abolish the minimum wage in a country that relied on it for so long. Okay, so positive effects of abolishing the minimum wage. Remember that value-cost ratio I was talking about earlier? Well, this is a scenario where it can become a positive. So, with the minimum wage, employers were forced to measure workers against a set cost, kind of like a one-size-fits-all, but we all know that's not how life really works. With no minimum wage, this allows a market wage to occur. This is where the wage that you work for is determined by what you are willing to do it for and how much the employer is willing to pay you to do it. So, if you have more skills or experience, you can be paid more if your employer agrees that your value is equal or greater to what you're asking. But what about the unskilled and inexperienced workforce? Don't worry, this method can actually be more beneficial. The minimum wage determines how much an employer legally has to pay you, but what about the opportunities of an unpaid internship? This can be more beneficial in the long run and can help break down the low socioeconomic cycle by gaining experience and connections through a position where previously with the minimum wage your value was not greater than your cost. Now for some negative effects. Consider the current job market at the moment. Currently there is a surplus in the demand for jobs and a deficit supply of jobs. Meaning if there were no minimum wage and the market determined your pay, how low would people be willing to work for in an economic situation like this? For example, as a university student, I am seeking a part-time job, just like all the other university students in Brisbane. So if the demand for jobs is greater than the supply for jobs, the price can be negotiated down. But how low can it really go? I guess to whoever is willing to work the cheapest. As a desperate graduate, I was applying for every job, no matter what the wage, and to get my foot in the door, I certainly would have worked nearly for free. This can lead to companies taking advantage of the current economic market and perhaps paying a slave-like wage to the lowest bidder. Now we have abolished the minimum wage, and the demand and supply points will meet each other based on the real market demand and supply, and this is the point that will determine the wage you were paid. Here is a perfect scenario, but as we all know, that's not how the world really works. If you are currently in the demand for a job like I am, you know that the demand is higher than the supply. Looking at this graph, you can see the price point is lower, meaning a lower wage. This was one of the negative points discussed, about employers taking advantage of the demand for jobs situation in our current economic market. Let's say, for example, that it was the other way around, and the supply for jobs was greater than the demand for jobs. People could argue a higher wage as they are in a better position to do so. So, we have looked at the effects of raising the minimum wage and abolishing it altogether. But what if we do nothing? What do I mean by this? I mean exactly that. Do nothing. Frederick Herzberg was an American psychologist who became one of the most influential names in business management. So what can a psychologist contribute to the minimum wage discussion? Well, one of his most well-known theories was his motivation theory. This theory identified two factors, hygiene factors and motivation factors. Hygiene factors are factors that do not relate to motivation. However, in the absence of these hygiene factors, the individual becomes unhappy. Some examples would be organizational environments such as policies, administration, job security, and working conditions. On the other hand, there are motivation factors that influence one's intrinsic motivation within the workforce. Some of the greatest examples are achievement, recognition, and interest in job. So where does money fit in? According to Herzberg, money is not a motivator, however, rather a hygiene factor, meaning that with it there is complacency, however without it there is unhappiness. What he's saying is, money is not a motivator. So why listen to one dead guy's outdated theory? Well, because I have two dead guys supporting the same cause. Nathaniel Hawthorne had a motivation theory as well, where it stated that the alteration of behavior by the subjects of study was due to their awareness of being observed. What happened was there was this study conducted in the name of the Hawthorne effect to test productivity connected to lighting. They would increase the lighting and the productivity increased. They decreased the lighting and the productivity still increased. The end result was that the workers were increasing productivity not because the lighting was changing, but because they felt special and people were watching them. Therefore, the Hawthorne effect also proved one of Herzberg's motivation theories, which was recognition. So all in all, we have explored the potential effects of raising the minimum wage, abolishing the minimum wage, and also the possibility of doing nothing at all. But it is important to be aware that no matter what we do with the minimum wage, we cannot make everyone happy. There are always positive and negative effects.